Hello and welcome to ANC Decides, the show that gives you up-to-the-minute reporting, analysis and commentary building up to the ANC's December elective conference. I'm your host, Mfundo Malabalan. Now, in our previous show, we broadcast source-based figures of support for ANC presidential candidates. Now, after feedback from you, our viewers, we've decided to only run audited figures because we do in fact value your input. Now, on to the main story for today. ANC Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa's campaign signature is clean governance, and now there are differing views about why his campaign seems to now be leaning towards radical economic transformation.
Clean governance is the anchor of Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa's campaign. At the heart of the campaign is state capture.
I'm not capturing, and I'm not captured. That should be clear on the record. And by whoever, foreign forces or Guptas or whoever, I'm not captured, and I'm absolutely clear about that. In my own conscience, in my own heart, I have never been captured by anyone.
Ramaphosa says corruption should be rooted out in all spheres of society to ensure that public funds are managed properly.
Some of us are quite committed to the project of rooting out corruption in our country. We would like to see a South Africa that is corruption-free, where our people, businesses, organizations operate on the basis of what they can offer, rather than operating on the basis of underhand means. Collusion and anti-competitive behavior is a form of corruption that undermines the proper management of public resources and also undermines social cohesion.
Given the high stakes of the ANC leadership race, Ramaphosa cannot afford to exclude economic transformation from his campaign.
That we are going to work day and night to come up with clear policies, clear strategies to transform this economy. We will first have to deal with the fact that the economy of our country is monopolized, is owned by a few entities in our country. And we are saying we must now make sure that we spread the ownership of the economy of our country so that it is owned by the majority of the people of our country.
Economic reform and clean governance are the main rallying points in the ANC race. The jury is out on which one will save the day. Bureau Report, ANN7.
Now, today in studio, we're joined by political analyst Professor Seepe. Professor, welcome to you.
Thank you for inviting me.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, today we're discussing the manifesto of the Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa and presidential hopeful. Now, he talks about the central task of the ANC being to change or transform the situation of the majority and to ensure that the wealth is in the hands of the majority. And he says critical to this are three steps: to unite, build, and renew the ANC. Now, how do you, that's the first step, he says. Now, how do you go about uniting, rebuilding, and renewing the ANC when you have a disillusioned youth, which makes up a majority of the country at this point? How do you do that?
Well, first of all, we must ask ourselves that has his conduct been that of uniting the ANC? And most people who are at least honest observers would argue that they don't see him as a player towards unity. This is a person who, at the slightest provocation, when he's invited by groupings that he knows to be hostile to his colleague and leader, Jacob Zuma, will rush. And when he gets there, what he'll do, he'll come up with insinuations that everybody knows are directed at other leaders. That is not a leader who unites. So I think if he wants to unite, he needs to move away from there. One of the things that people will do is that if I want to unite and I work with a colleague, and a colleague is seen to, or other people are antagonistic to that colleague of mine, what I'll do, I'll not go and share platforms. Instead, I'll make sure that there is a discussion to say, I belong to this organization, and as a member of this organization, this is how we do things.
But
you don't
Professor,
rush.
There's been talk now of must it be unity at all costs? Does the ANC not need to acknowledge some of the issues? To say if he's speaking openly, I said this yesterday, that it begins by acknowledging that you'll sort out a problem. So is it now disunity in that form if you're going to acknowledge that there are elements that are problematic?
No, but when
ANC?
you use platforms to undermine your own people, your own grouping, what you do, because those people do have also supporters, what they do, then they become hostile to you. You are not bringing them in. There are ways in which you can campaign. People have campaigned on the basis of what you call it, an antagonistic posture, where what you present are simply attempts to provide solutions. And when you provide solutions, people will gravitate towards solutions. They're not going to gravitate to the fact that you use every opportunity to show how much you dislike somebody else. That is not how you build unity. But at the same time, it also smacks of intellectual bankruptcy, because you appeal to the base. You have no better solutions, so what you do is to use the platform to attack others. There have been other people. Actually, what the country needs now is how do we move from where we are. And what is interesting about some of these leaders, when they stand up, they even speak as if they're not part of the current leadership. They almost dissociate themselves. They don't take ownership. When we talk about the ANC failing, as Gwede has putting it, that the failure must be put on the doorsteps of all the members of the ANC. You can't conveniently want to isolate. You must also tell us where you stand and what did you do to make sure that you, as a leader, so you can't pretend like you are not part of the group.
Okay. Now, perhaps we can rope in Ebrahim Fakir. Welcome. It's good to have you with us. No, it's a pleasure. Now, take us through your take. We're discussing Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa's manifesto. He talks about 3 critical steps, and the first one being to build, unite and renew the ANC. And the question is, how do you go about uniting the ANC if we really don't tackle what divides the ANC?
Well, I think that's precisely the problem. But this is the problem of members, not necessarily always only leaders. Because if you think and you cast your mind back to the policy conference, what you're talking about here is fundamentally diametrically opposed conceptions, not just of policy, but also of government. So you've got one side which is arguing for a form of government which wants concentrated and focused power and authority in the executive, specifically within the person of the president, right, firstly. Secondly, they're arguing for doing away with an entire regulatory framework. All of the procurement rules, all of the Public Finance Management Act, the Municipal Finance Management Act, procurement rules at state-owned enterprises and other things. So that's your second fundamental division. Your third goes down to the approach to which you want to incept socio-economic change. Now, the one side, the one that's arguing for focused, concentrated executive power and doing away with regulatory constraints, as they call it, also want things like land expropriation without compensation, renewing the mandate of the Reserve Bank or changing the mandate of the Reserve Bank, so to speak. But let me ask this fundamental question. Isn't that a misconception about how social and economic change actually happens? Because tomorrow, if I changed the mandate of the Reserve Bank, how is it going to incept growth? And how is that going to preside over...
Is that not the tough balancing act here? That we want to stimulate growth, but at the same time, we know that we need these reforms. So how do you balance the two? Because many talk of the neoliberal policies here, that to a certain extent we have government that has surrendered policy formulation to capital. So how do you balance the two and say, yes, we need to be part of the economy and we need to grow it, but at the same time, we've got problems with South Africans on the ground.
That's precisely the problem of the ANC. How do you, on the one hand, argue that you want to incept fundamental policy change, but then at the same time argue from the other side of your mouth that actually you've conceded and ceded all policy-making power to the private sector? I'm not necessarily sure that's true. Let's just look at the record of the ANC government in the first 20 years of power. Okay? So they first go through an entire reconstruction effort, which is to bring in the Bantustans, unite a state, unite a country, get over social divisions and social antagonisms in terms of race.
RDP.
Well, not only in the form of
project,
RDP, not only in the form of RDP, in the form of actually reconfiguring the nature of the state, incepting a new constitution, creating equality, creating freedom, bringing in spatial reintegration. That's just one aspect. The second aspect is the construction of the largest social welfare state in sub-Saharan Africa. A massive rollout of housing programs, massive extension of welfare programs, but that is not enough for a society to go onto a higher growth trajectory. You have to unlock growth in the economy now. In an environment of so-called state capture, but what I call out-and-out corruption, not necessarily state capture, I call it out-and-out corruption. You have receding trust in the government. Why, in an era of receding trust and low confidence that government can do what it says it will do, would you want to give them more power?
That's an interesting point. We now cross over to our reporter Lemo, who's out in Limpopo, to get their take in Limpopo on what is happening. Lemo, a warm welcome to you. Now, Lemo, we understand that you are in the Collins Shabani sub-region where mostly are backing Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa. Exactly talk us through the needs of the community that has informed their position to say they want to be backing the Deputy President. Lemu, I hope you can hear it. I'll just rephrase. We understand that you're in the Collins Shabani sub-region. Can you just take us through the needs of the community there? Within that region, what informed their decision to be supporting the Deputy President? Well, we seem to have lost Lemu. We'll try again a bit later on to get her back. We'll now cross over to our reporter, Nomusa Pungula, who's out in KZN. Nomusa, a warm welcome to you. Now, you today are in Pietermaritzburg. Can you take us through some of the dynamics there at this point in terms of the numbers, who they're leaning towards?
Well, good evening, Fundo, and good evening to our viewers. As far as we know, thus far, 28 branches have had their BGMs rather, and they have all been leaning towards NDZs. However, we have noted that in the reports that we have received from our sources, some of the branches on the north are leaning towards CR17, and we understand that also some of the branches that are in the north that were said to be supporting the president, or rather the chairperson of KZN before Sihle Zikalala, which is Senzo Mchunu, they were then saying that they are going to support CR17, and those branches have been said to be about 20 branches from the north. But we also understand that this is just the beginning, Fundo. Most of the branches are still yet to sit for their BGM, so therefore it is still early days to say who exactly these branches are going to support, because thus far, according to our sources, the province has not even said half of the branches, not even half of the branches have had their BGMs. So therefore, right now we can say that the branches are leaning towards NDZ. However, CR17 is also gaining momentum, but particularly in the north. You'll remember that we reported yesterday that CR17 in the region of Abaqulusi, he received 6 of the nomination from 6 branches, whereas NDZ received 14 from Ulundi. So therefore, as you can see, the numbers keep changing as per the branches keep on, or as the branches continues with their BGM, Fundo.
No, it's certainly a speculative game at this point, but it's not finished until we see them go and actually tick on that box. But thank you very much. We now cross over to Ebrahim Fakir, who's out in Limpopo. Ebrahim, we'll try again. I know that you are in the Collins Shabani sub-region, where mostly backed Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa. Can you just take us through the needs in that region that have informed the decision to back the Deputy President?
A very good afternoon to you, Mfundo, and thank you very much indeed. Vembe region is where we have been this whole week. And yesterday we were in the Collins Chabane sub-region where we spoke to some of those branch members coming from 3 different branches in that sub-region. However, today we find ourselves in the Makhado sub-region where a branch meeting is currently about to take place in the Mutshedi branch, also known as Ward 17. And as you can see, just towards my left, I want to show you right now, it's still registration processes that are underway, as of course you do know that the branch still has to determine whether core rate can be reached, which is obviously 50+1 members. And I just want to bring in the chairperson of the branch, Mr. Stephen Matamela. Thank you so much, chairperson, for joining us. Just talk to us about the kind of turnout here today. I mean, we can see the branding on the car. We've heard the songs that are being sang here. It almost leads towards a certain direction. But what is likely to happen in this branch today?
The branch members are gathered here and it is overwhelming. People are happy, people are raring to go, and they want to come here and nominate the future president and his collective of this country, of the ANC, I'm sorry.
Now, just as a chairperson, I'm sure there's been talks about your preference when it comes to the candidates, but what makes Cyril Ramaphosa stand out for this branch?
This is not a factional terrain. As Vembe region, we are very much fresh from the REC conference recently. The conference where the branches of the ANC in the whole regions took a resolution to say, as Vembe, we are supporting Comrade Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa to become the next ANC president.
Well, thank you very much, Ntate Stephen Matamela, who is the chairperson of the Mutshedi branch, also known as Ward 17 in the Makhado sub-region. Just saying that, you know, from their side, it is quite clear on who their candidate will be and will be emerging from this nomination meeting. And we also know that in Vembe, there were about 11 yesterday as we spoke to the regional coordinator of those BGMs that have already sat. And we know that out of the 11, it was the 9 that actually determined Cyril Ramaphosa as their preferred candidate, having 2 not being able to reach a quorum. Now, it also remains to be seen what comes out of this meeting. Will that name be the majority's preferred candidate? And we will definitely be here for that. And also, as the other events, as we know that policy discussions will also come to unfold, we'll also be here for that and also get to see where this branch is headed to.
No, thank you very much, Lemohang. We'll keep in touch as days progress. Now, back to studio. Ebrahim, maybe we could start with you. It seems that the Deputy President's campaign is centered around rooting out corruption. And we all cannot deny that corruption takes from all of us. I mean, this is money that could be channeled to certain projects that change the lives of ordinary people. But here it's taken away. But I can remember a time in 2007 where Kgalema Motlanthe talked about the rot being across the board, that almost all projects are conceived to somehow fund certain people. So would you say we can attribute this corruption to any single person, or it's a problem across the board in provinces, municipalities? Where do we start?
No, well, I mean, look, it's absolutely true that corruption is a problem across the board, but it's that the anti-corruption is not merely the kingpin of Cyril Ramaphosa's campaign. I mean, that is true for every one of the 7 candidates who are contesting the ANC leadership race. So there is no candidate who is going to tell you that corruption is not a problem. I think that's it's a given. And I would argue that that's not necessarily the center of Ramaphosa's campaign. The center of Ramaphosa's campaign, in fact, is renewal of the ANC, self-correction of the ANC, getting together a rational center within the ANC as a political party, which must then transpose that rational center into the state. Because the argument I think that camp makes is that at the moment, many of the serious resolutions taken by the ANC, including recommendations made by successive Secretary Generals, not just Gwede Mantashe, but successive Secretary Generals, about renewal in the ANC, about fighting the level of impunity in the way in which the rules of the ANC are used to advance special interests in the state, and how the rules of the state are being used to advance special interest of the ANC. So if you think about the way in which President Zuma operates, he takes rules from the ANC and implements them in the state. And every time someone in the state says, sorry, you can't do that, he will retreat and say, sorry, but I'm president of the ANC. I've got executive power. I must be allowed to do as I choose. Now, when he wants to achieve some other political objective, he will say, I want to reshuffle my cabinet without consulting his colleagues in the ANC. And then they would say, but Mr. President, what are you doing? And he'd say, oh, hold on, the Constitution gives me the right to do this. So he plays a game of checks and balances and chess.
So we need a clear divide of party and state.
Absolutely we need that. But not only do we need that clear divide, which is there, we need someone who operates without the level of impunity that current government is operating in, not just in the ANC, but also in the state. So impunity and the inability to actually respect the set of rules that everyone commonly agrees on are the rules, are the problem. It's not just a problem around the leadership contest, it is also a problem of credentials. I wouldn't be surprised if there are more fights which emerge in the ANC now about who is a proper delegate and who is not a delegate. And that all comes down to the credentials process. And if you have provincial leaders who are going to manipulate credentials processes with the level of impunity that they've tried to do so far, KZN being one example, then I'm afraid the ANC is not going to be able to hold a center. So that, in my view, is in fact what Cyril Ramaphosa's campaign is centered on. Of course, corruption is a problem, as you say, around the country. And it's not just in municipalities, in provinces, at national government, in the state, in parastatals and so forth. It is also in the private sector. And perhaps we don't talk enough in our society about the level of corruption and impunity, not just in the state, but also in the private sector.
No, it certainly is worth a conversation, that one. But beyond this, Prof, Cyril Ramaphosa goes on to talk about perhaps vetting or having the right to say certain people cannot be members of the ANC at a later stage. Do you think that is worth doing, to say we need to talk about the type of cadre, we need to talk about the membership, that it mustn't just be where we talk of a broad church and anybody's welcome. You need to really be a person that they feel is a character that is good enough to be part of that organization?
Yeah, let me say, that which you have said would be said by any leader of the ANC right now. And they've been saying that. Even the issue that you talk about corruption, you talk about unity, you talk about renewal, no leader of the ANC does not say that. But you actually judge a leader by their actions. It is also true that when you talk about the President Zuma, that he has mastered the art of making sure that you can't fault him, because he has tried to remain true to the ANC in a sense that when it makes decisions, he does not antagonize, unlike the previous president, Thabo Mbeki. That's why he was put out. Jacob Zuma is a very difficult person to put out. But what we should not do, we should not create a dishonest appraisal of Cyril. For me, there are concerns that I have that are clear and that have been public. One, there was a time when we had emails, and Cyril, every corner, every platform, he'd be talking about these emails and certain people being implicated. Until we had emails about him. And he no longer talks about emails. There was a time when there was an issue when the Protector's report came, he talked about the Judicial Commission of Inquiry. And Cyril, as a lawyer, knows fully well that that report was taken under review. But he goes to stadiums and rallies and calls for a Judicial Commission of Inquiry. And when the president says, but I have never said that we should not have it, but when we have it, we must do it. He goes and says, we must do it now. You'd expect that somebody who's trained as a lawyer would understand that once it's under review, and also because there are constitutional issues, but when you want to play to the gallery, even the need for you to be rational loses it. It behaves like the DA did where they went to court and they wanted to force this matter. And the court said, but the matter is under review. I expect more from Cyril than what I've seen. Then the issue about the wealth.
I can see, Ebrahim, you seem to want to interject right there.
Because I fundamentally disagree, and I disagree for two reasons. You can finish, and I'll tell you why I disagree.
Then you talk about the issue of making sure that everybody benefits. I went to Marikana. I've seen workers the conditions of squalor where they lived. And I've spoken to those workers. They've actually said, when Cyril was on the board, we hoped that he was going to make sure that there are changes. But they will tell you today, even he himself, when he was asked to make an apology, it was in 5 years later. And then what does he say? He says that I'll go and talk to Winnie Mandela so that we can go there. These are not lies. These are things that happened.
Let's give Ebrahim a chance. Yes.
The idea that President Zuma is immune from criticism in the way in which he's approached alliance partners and society, and the fact, as Prof says, everyone must benefit. I'm gobsmacked, simply, because there are three things. Let me give you three indicators. First, is President Zuma is the only ANC president to have presided over a net loss of political support in 3 successive elections from 2009. He's the only ANC president which has presided over no less than 3 splits within the ANC and the broader alliance. He's the only ANC president which has presided over the loss of support in metropolitan areas, the key drivers of growth and connection to the global elite. Once a political party loses influence over that cohort in society, as the Labour Party in Britain did in 1979 to Thatcher, you literally lose control of the society. That's my first fundamental disagreement. My second disagreement is that there has never been as much of a crisis in the ANC and the alliance as there has been under President Zuma. Now, that may well be because of internal problems in each of those organizations, but the leader of the alliance is the person who's meant to preside over uniting it. Third, on the question of Cyril Ramaphosa, I find it strange that there's suddenly a repudiation of Cyril Ramaphosa, the very person who was elected ANC deputy president in 2012 on the back of Marikana. Now, I would simply ask the question,
what has changed?
Not only what has changed,
can we deal with that?
Why are you repudiating? My simple question to ANC members is, are you repudiating your deputy president? If so, have a disciplinary and kick him out of the party.
Yeah, no, actually, let's agree. There are differences within the ANC. And number one, it is not true that we are saying, or anybody saying, that President Zuma is immune to criticism. I think President Zuma must be criticized where he is wrong. So that is the first. So let's park that. Let's not create something that does not exist.
Would you also
no.
Let me ask you this. For the same reasons that Thabo Mbeki was recalled, are the same reasons not applied to recall Jacob Zuma?
Do they apply?
No. The difference is the ANC is the one that recalled President Thabo Mbeki. And if the ANC wants to recall President Zuma, it must do so. And nobody has suggested that it should not do so. That's a second issue. Then the third issue that I would like to raise is that if you talk about the loss of the ANC, if you had been on the ground, I was in the Eastern Cape where the ANC lost to Nelson Mandela. If you looked at the issues there were infighting. You can't blame the loss to one person. That's why the ANC itself accepted that we have contributed collectively, including Cyril Ramaphosa, because he is the second in charge of the ANC. So this notion of not taking collective responsibility is, for me, irresponsible, and it creates a messiah around the challenges that the ANC is facing. And last point is, I expect that the ANC was going to continue to have difficulties. I see it as a historical inevitability because it has not resolved those internal challenges that are coming, that democracy makes possible. At the moment, they are, as you yourself have said, in terms of the conception of the state, conception of democracy, they differ. But as we move forward, you'd expect that those things, the contradiction will be so sharp. I didn't expect that the youth league of the ANC under Malema was going to stay within the ANC.
Gentlemen, unfortunately,
but then, Prof, why would they stay together?
They should.
Okay. Unfortunately, lovely heated debate. I wish we had more time to discuss this because it's important that we hear all these differing views, but unfortunately that's where we have to end it. Now, for all your views, actually, we have a poll question this week, and our poll question this week, we seem to have lost our poll question. We're out of time. But please do give us your feedback, your views on our Twitter handle. It's @ANN7TV.